All right, on we go to letter 51. Welcome back. This is going to be letter on Baiae and morals. All right, let's dive into this here. He says here, every man does the best he can. Oh, let me just bring that back. Okay. For some reason, my history. Okay. Every man does the best he can, my dear Lucilius. You, over there, have Etna, that lofty and most celebrated mountain of Sicily, although I cannot make out why Messala, or was it Valgius, for I have been reading in both, has called it unique, inasmuch as many regions belch forth fire, not merely the lofty ones where the phenomenon is more frequent, presumably because fire rises to the greatest possible height, but low-lying places also. As for myself, I do the best I can. I have had to be satisfied with Baiae, and I left it the day after I reached it, for Baiae is a place to be avoided because, though it has certain natural advantages, luxury has claimed it for her own exclusive resort. So let's look at the footnotes here. Etna was one of the special interest to Lucilius. Besides being a governor in Sicily, he may have written a poem about Etna. For Seneca's own curiosity regarding the mountain compare, and he's got that. Okay, so Etna is the mountain, and Baiae, I'm sure, is a mountain too. Not far from Naples and across from the bay from Puteoli was a fashionable and dissolute watering place. Okay, so I guess it's not a mountain. It's a watering place. All right. So what he's saying here, though, is he's saying that, look, um, every man does the best he can, right? I'm doing the best I can. You're doing the best you can. Okay. And he's saying that, hey, you've got this mountain over there, and he goes into about how it could belch fire. I guess it's a volcano, and I'm doing the best I can, and I have to be satisfied with something that's not quite as nice. Okay, but hey, it is what it is, right? So he's comparing two different environments or conditions. All right, and he's saying both of us are doing the best we can. What then, you say, should any place be singled out as an object of aversion? Not at all. But just as, to the wise and upright man, one style of clothing is more suitable than another, without his having an aversion for any particular color, but because he thinks that some colors do not befit one who has adopted the simple life. So there are places also which the wise man, or he who is on the way towards wisdom, will avoid as foreign to good morals. So here he's getting into the heart of the matter, which is, should you avoid places? Are they not so good? And he's saying that, look, it's not that you should necessarily avoid these places, but it's just that you don't prefer them. It's just that, just like you might think that wearing a certain thing might not suit a man of wisdom, a wise man maybe shouldn't travel to these places because they're just not the best places to go, right? And we'll get more into it here. He says in verse 3, therefore, if he is contemplating withdrawal from the world, he will not select Canopus, although Canopus does not keep any man from living simply, nor Baiae either, for both places have begun to be resorts of vice. Canopus luxury pampers itself to the utmost degree. At Baiae, it is even more lax, as if the place itself demanded a certain amount of license. So the reason why he's saying that these places are not good is because of the attributes, right? So he's saying that, it's some of these places are luxurious places. They're resorts. They have a lot of vices, right? You can think of Las Vegas, right? Maybe not the best place to to live if you're trying to exercise your Stoic wisdom and morality. Just saying, right? There's a lot of things that are vices that are there, and that's the point of that place. And so that's what he's saying. In verse 4, he says, we ought to select abodes which are wholesome not only for the body but also for the character. Just as I do not care to live in a place of torture, neither do I care to live in a cafe, to witness persons wandering drunk along the beach, the riotous reveling of sailing parties, the lakes adin with choral song, and all the other ways in which luxury, when it is, so to speak, released from the restraints of law, not merely sins, but blazons its sins abroad. Why must I witness all this? So he's saying, look, there's no need to really go to places where people are being dumb, getting drunk. It's like, why even watch this? Why even, you should think about not just a place for your body, but also for your character, right? Don't go to a place that is going to be full of vices and corruption and people doing things and living lives the way that you don't want to live your life. In verse 5, he says, to speak, we ought to see that we flee to the greatest possible distance from provocations to vice. We should toughen our minds and remove them far from the allurements of pleasure. A single winter relaxed Hannibal's fiber. His pampering in Campania took the vigor out of that hero who had triumphed over Alpine snows. He conquered with his weapons, but was conquered by his vices. So he's saying, look, we should get away from these places that are tempting, right? Even this great warrior, all right, he had conquered Alpine snows, had climbed these mountains, but this one place with its vices, it took him down, all right? So it will take you down too. In verse 6, he says, we too have a war to wage, a type of warfare in which there is no allowed... Let me increase this, actually. Let me go back here. I just realized that it was a little hard to read here. All right. We too have a war to wage, a type of warfare in which there is allowed no rest or furlough. To be conquered, in the first place, are pleasures, which, as you see, have carried off even the sternest characters. If a man has once understood how great is the task which he has entered upon, he will see that there must be no dainty or effeminate conduct. For what have I to do with those hot baths or with the sweating room where they shut in dry steam, which is to drain your strength? Perspiration should flow only after toil. Okay, so, I mean, he's making some points here, maybe not ones that you agree with or I agree with about sweat lodges or, steam, what do you call saunas and stuff like that. But, that's what he believes. And it's a fine argument, right? But his point is that, like, these luxurious things and pleasures, maybe it's best to avoid some of these things, right? It's going to make you weak, right? And you don't want to be weak. So avoid the things that are going to make you weak. That I think that's a better way of looking at this. In verse 7, he says, suppose we do what Hannibal did. Check the course of events, give up the war, and give over our bodies to be coddled. Every one would rightly blame us for untimely sloth, a thing fraught with peril even to the victor, to say nothing of one who is only on the way to victory. And we have even less right to do this than those followers of the Carthaginian flag. For our danger is greater than theirs if we slacken, and our toil is greater than theirs if we press ahead. So what is he saying here? Okay. So he's comparing, what Hannibal did, okay, historically, and how he gave up the war, okay, and give over our bodies to be coddled, right? So if we did that, if we just went for the luxuries in life, then everyone would blame us for our untimely sloth, okay? A thing fraught with peril even for the victor. And he's saying that, that if you're on the way to victory, this is not appropriate for you. If you're trying to achieve victory in life, wasting your time with luxuries is not the way to go. Okay. And he's saying that we have even less right to do this than those of the Carthaginian flag, which was Hannibal's country, right? Or the war that he was fighting, because our danger is greater than theirs if we slacken. So, because we're dealing with life, with the important things of life as philosophy, right? Our toil is greater than theirs, even if we press ahead. So we're fighting so all that he's trying to say is that we're fighting this really hard battle, right? As philosophers and learning and growing. And if we don't do this, it's the greatest stake, right? So we don't have time. We don't have time to waste. We don't want to be distracted. In verse 8, he says, fortune is fighting against me, and I shall not carry out her commands. I refuse to submit to the yoke. Nay, rather, I shake off the yoke that is upon me, an act which demands even greater courage. The soul is not to be pampered. Surrendering to pleasure means also surrendering to pain, surrendering to toil, surrendering to poverty. Both ambition and anger will wish to have the same rights over me as pleasure, and I shall be torn asunder, or rather pulled to pieces amid all these conflicting passions. So what he's saying here is he's saying that, look, fortune is fighting against me. And I'm not gonna give into it. Okay, I throw off this yoke of right. I'm not gonna have my soul pampered. I'm not surrendering to pleasure. Okay, because it means surrendering to pain, surrendering to toil, to poverty. Right, because that's what it takes in order to obtain the things. Right, ambition and anger will have the same rights over me as pleasure. Right, and so he's saying that if I give into all these things, then I'm going to be torn by all these conflicting passions, all these things, right? I want to have pleasure, but I want to have peace. I want to have time, but I want to make money, and I want to have luxury. Like all these things are in conflict with each other. In verse 9, he says, I have set freedom before my eyes, and am striving for that reward. And what is freedom, you ask? It means not being a slave to any circumstance, to any constraint, to any chance. It means compelling fortune to enter the lists on equal terms. And on the day when I know that I have the upper hand, her power will be naught. When I have death in my own control, shall I take orders from her? So he's saying, look, here's what I'm doing, okay? I want freedom. And what is freedom? It's not being a slave to circumstance, to any constraint, to chance. It means that whatever happens, it doesn't matter. Compelling fortune to enter her list on equal terms. It doesn't matter which way that things go. I'm okay with either one, with any of those things. And he's going to say, and then that's when I know I have the upper hand. When I have that upper hand, okay? When I have death in my control, when I can face death, when I have that in my control, when I'm the master of myself, then am I going to take orders from fortune? No, I think not. In verse 10, he says, therefore, a man occupied with such reflection should choose an austere and pure dwelling place. The spirit is weakened by surroundings that are too pleasant. And without a doubt, one's place of residence can contribute towards impairing its vigor. Animals whose hoofs are hardened on rough ground can travel any road, but when they are fattened on soft, marshy meadows, their hoofs are soon worn out. The bravest soldier comes from rock-ribbed regions, but the town-bred and the home-bred are sluggish in action. The hand which turns from the plow to the sword never objects to toil, but your sleek and well-dressed dandy quails at the first cloud of dust. So he's saying, look, you can't be in too pleasant of a place. It can't be too easy, or you will become weak. Even animals that are in meadows that are soft, their hooves become weak. Right? A soldier, the bravest soldier comes from places that were hard, right? Not from a town or or some place that's easy, right? He says that you've got to go out there and you've got to actually face difficulties in life. You cannot try to go to places where it's just simple and easy for you. That's going to make you weak. In verse 11, he says, being trained in a rugged country strengthens the character and fits it for great undertakings. It was more honorable in Scipio to spend his exile at Laternium than Baiae. His downfall did not need a setting so effeminate. Those also in whose hands the rising fortunes of Rome first transferred the wealth of the state, Gaius Marius, Gnaeus, Pompey, and Caesar did indeed build villas near Baiae, but they set them on the very tops of the mountains. This seemed more soldier-like, to look down from a lofty height upon land spread far and wide below. Note the situation, position, and type of building which they chose. You will see they were not country places; they were camps. So again, he's really just saying the same thing about how you don't want to be in a soft and easy place, right? And Scipio, he spent his exile in a hard place, not this resort Baiae, right? And he's saying that even the great the great emperors of Rome, the great men of Rome, that they went to Baiae, this luxury place, but they built their villas up on top of the mountains where they could look down, and it was more like a camp than it was this luxury place. So they still even made it, they didn't just dwell in this luxury of this place. In verse 12, he says, do you suppose Cato would ever have dwelt in a pleasure palace, that he might count the lewd women as they sailed past, that many kinds of barges painted in all sorts of colors, the roses which were wafted about the lake, or that he might listen to the nocturnal brawls of serenaders? Would he have not preferred to remain in the shelter of a trench thrown up by his own hands to serve for a single night? Would not anyone who is a man have his slumbers broken by a war trumpet rather than by a chorus of serenaders? So again, he's saying here, be a man, right? Stop looking for luxury. Look for hard places. Could you imagine someone like Cato, this famous tough man? Can you imagine him living in this luxurious place? I don't think so. In verse 13, he says, "But I have been haranguing against Baiae long enough. Although I could never harangue enough against vice. Vice, Lucilius, is what I wish you to proceed against, without limit and without end. For it has neither limit nor end. If any vice rend your heart, cast it away from you. And if you cannot be rid of it in any other way, pluck out your heart also. Above all, drive pleasures from your sight. Hate them beyond all other things, for they are like bandits whom the Egyptians call lovers, who embrace us only to garrote us farewell." So he's saying here, look, get rid of vices. Hate them. Okay, don't go into places where there are vices. Don't live in the places where you're going to be tempted by vices. And if you can't get rid of a vice, you're better off without your heart. Pluck out your own heart. Drive all these pleasures from your sight. Okay, and he says that they're kind of like, people who will say that they love you and then they just slit your throat because you think that these things are good, but they will be your downfall. I'll see you tomorrow.